This is how I made my fully functional, collapsible Rio Ripper scissors from Gachiakuta. If you want to follow along with my specific pattern, you can find it on my Etsy in the link below, or just use this as a general guide for your own pattern. You would need these cheap floor tiles. I got mine from Canadian Tire for like $15. I start off by tracing my handle patterns onto the floor tiles. I first traced the right handle twice, and then I stacked another mat underneath with the rough sides facing each other. I used a bunch of pins to keep them together while I cut both layers out. This method reduces cutting time and misalignment. Then I repeated the same process with the other handle. And you need a sharp blade for this. Then I cut the blades out onto 12mm foam. Now it's only in pieces like this because of the size limitation of the foam mats, but if you're using a long foam roll, you can cut them out as one long piece. Then I cut the blades out again, this time on 6mm foam. Now go ahead and cut out all your detailing and transfer that to 3mm foam. I'm using an X-Acto knife just to get all the edges nice and precise. Now you want to cut out all the mid pieces. You first want to trace the full long shape, then cut along the dotted line, flip it over and trace the shorter shape. It should look like this, one long, one short. And for the right side, you want to flip it over, trace the long, then flip it back over, and then trace the short. Oh, and hang on to these little pieces. Lastly, go ahead and cut out that screw head shape and transfer it to 12mm foam. I'm actually cutting it just a bit bigger than what the pattern calls for. So let's recap. We have 4 right handles, 4 left handles, 2 left mid pieces, 2 right mid pieces, 2 sets of blade pieces on 12 and on 6mm, and 2 circle screw heads. Now let's head back to the mid pieces. So I made a mistake and cut this out on the short piece. The steps are the same except you're going to cut it on the long piece. You're simply cutting out the big circle and the big triangle in both the left and right long pieces. Your 2 long pieces with the smooth side up should look like this, with the triangles facing the same direction. Then I sketched out the line that will be in my channel that ran from my midsection all the way up to my handles, wrapping around it. In hindsight, I would have made it much straighter so that I can run the dowel as far up as possible. I also didn't realize that having a single centered dowel will turn my handle into essentially a swivel. I actually forgot to film it, but I did add another channel right next to the original one to prevent it from swiveling. But anyway, here's me wasting like 2 hours of my life trying to bend this because it completely lost its shape. I cut the pipes to the right length and I hot glue them into place. And to be honest, I'm not sure if these pipes did anything structurally. I feel like wrapping it all the way around was unnecessary and made it heavier than it had to be. I made a channel and I marked exactly where the dowel meets the pipe. Then I made the hole and drilled right into it, just into the first layer, not all the way through. The hole was just a little bit too small, so I had to shave off some of the wood in order for it to fit, and I poured a bunch of glue into the hole and stuck everything together. Then I glued the dowel into its place, followed by the pipe. And this is with the other layer of foam glued down over it, sandwiching everything together. With both handles sandwiched, you want to place them together. On the right side, you want to stack upward, making sure that your rough sides are together. This makes the right handle flush with the left mid-piece. For the left side, you want to stack in the opposite direction, which is downward. And I might look like I'm stacking upward right now, but that's just because this whole thing has been flipped over. So this is technically the back of the left handle. I know this might have been a bit confusing, but just remember, right handle, stack upward, left handle, stack downward. Now remember those little pieces I told you to hang on to? Well, I'm going to cut them out from their respective handles. Ideally, I should have done this in the initial cutting stage before I put everything together, but oh well. And now it's time to start carving it all out. Please use a sharp blade. I'm using a really dull blade and it took me twice the time to do this and it's super messy. There's 4 layers, 2 on top and 2 below, and I'm using that midpoint to guide where the bevel ends. Holding my long piece onto the handle, I'm going to draw a line from the bottom all the way up to about 6 inches, meeting at that midpoint. I repeat the same step on the other side, but I start at that bend right there, not all the way at the bottom. Then I carefully follow the lines and cut it out so it creates that tapered effect. And I continue it all the way down to the long piece as well. And following the pattern, I tapered the inner part of the triangle. Notice I start removing only half the thickness, then increasing the slope closer to the tip of the triangle. And I just follow the pattern, creating the bevel lines and using that midpoint to guide where the slope ends. Remember to repeat on both sides. And using a dowel, make sure that the tip of your blade and the center point are perfectly aligned. Trace the dowel for what would be your new center line. Repeat the same process on the left and right of the center line. This time, slightly angle them inward to follow the tapered shape of the blade. Next, add a pipe to follow the bend of the channel. Then you want to cut a dowel that runs from the bend of the pipe to the end of the pipe plus 4 inches. Mark the end point and you're going to sand the longer part so that it can fit within the piping. Unfortunately, I could not find a dowel that fit perfectly. They were either too big or too small. Now slide the sanded dowel into the piping up until that mark that we made earlier. You're going to repeat the same process for the upper parts of the bend, but this time instead of leaving 4 inches, that number is going to be the length of your handle channel. Glue it all into place, and I like to go back and fill in any gaps with some hot glue. Then repeat these same steps for the other dowel on the left side. As you can see, I didn't bother using full piping for that one. And on the right, I just used wood, no pipe. Then comes the fun part. You get to drill into the PVC pipe and the wood. Make sure you hold it at a 90-degree angle because you don't want it slanting. Remember I said I made a separate channel in my handle to prevent it from swiveling? Well, I'm adding a PVC pipe in there for more structure. Then I cut out the line details step by step. I remove each piece gradually, tracing the remainder as I go. You should end up with this stepped effect in the end. Now when laying the details, I want to remove some of the material that goes over the pipe. This creates a leveled surface for all the other layers to lay on top. Then I just hot glued everything together. And you see I already pre-stacked and glued the rest of the details and I just stuck that right on top. For the blade, I glued together the 12mm pieces to form one long blade. Then I continued that line from the top all the way down to the tip of the blade. Then I'm going to cut a channel for where the dowel is going to lay. Be careful not to cut right through the foam. And here's my boss coming to inspect that everything is up to code. Then I shave off the end of the dowel just to create a tip so that it's not as bulky at the very end. I just removed some material from the side so it fits nicely in the tapered tip of the blade. I lined up the mid piece that we created earlier and used that to guide the angle of my dowels. You see how my line is kind of curving? That's okay. We only really care about that top section where it connects to line up straight. And then we just cut the channels out. Laying a piece of PVC in the groove, I draw a line to match the angled edge of the blade. Then I bring in my mid piece to line everything up, then mark where the dowel ends plus a little extra. Then I saw that angle off and cut the pipe to the little extra mark. I repeated those steps for all 3 of the pipes, and now it's time to assemble it. With my dowel laying in the middle of the blade, I line up my PVC pipe and I mark that first point that we made onto the middle dowel. Then I just cut it to that point. Repeat these steps on both sides and it should look something like this. Or not, I don't know what you did. Now you're going to line up your cut part of the dowel with your PVC pipe. Then copy over that mark to the dowel. Then I sanded it down so that it can fit into the PVC pipe. We only need for it to slide in up until that point. And don't forget to sand the upper pieces too. I hot glued the dowels into the pipe just up until that mark and I glued everything down into the channels. I didn't film it, but on the underside of this white 6mm foam, I did glue the 3mm rune design onto it. Then I just hot glued the whole thing onto my blade. Then using the pattern, I traced out the blade bevel on one side. You're creating that sharp edge of the scissors that actually does the cutting. So make sure you're beveling the correct side for each blade. Then zoom, zoom, zoom. You're going to sand everything down and please use some kind of respirator mask, a paper bag, something, anything because this shit gets everywhere. For some finishing touches, I added this trim just to clean it up a little bit, make it look a bit neater. To create that dome shape of the screw head, I heated up the foam and used a tennis ball to curve it. You can use any round surface, even your kneecap. Then I drew a thick line to mimic the screwdriver slot thing. Then I cut it out, making sure that my blade is at a 90-degree angle from the foam. And don't flatten the foam while you cut it because it's not going to look very sleek. Lastly, I cut out some holes for magnets to keep the scissors closed. And I hot glued them in. And I suggest using stronger magnets. These were from the dollar store and they worked, but not that well. And here's a quick time lapse of me painting it. I hate painting, so I'm not going to go into detail on like the weathering and all that stuff. So yeah, that's it.